Welcome to Horror Year, where every story is a journey into the unknown. If you're brave enough to face your darkest fears and uncover the most chilling tales, you've come to the right place. So, dim the lights, turn up the volume, and subscribe to Horror Year. Your journey into terror begins now. Claire moved into her new flat in the city center on a gloomy autumn evening. She loved all things antique, and the building was ancient but charming with a vintage flair. The enormous, elaborate mirror in the bedroom, its surface a little worn with age and evoking a sense of mystery, was her favorite feature of the property. Claire slept soundly the first several nights, her deep sleep lulled by the sounds of the city. However, she woke up abruptly on the fourth night, her heart racing for no apparent cause. The only sound in the room was the light tap of rain on the window pane. She saw something in the mirror as she struggled to slow her beating heart, a shadow that moved when she did not. Sitting up, she fixed her gaze on the reflection, but saw nothing unusual. Reassuring herself that it was all in her head, she tried to fall back asleep. Her gaze kept returning to the mirror, which was now a menacing presence in the dimly lit room, but sleep would not come. Claire was startled out of sleep the next night too, but this time it was whispers. It came from the direction of the mirror. It was faint, hardly audible. As soon as she switched on the light, the whispers ceased. Nothing out of the ordinary reflected in the mirror, only her own wide-eyed, terrified face. The abnormalities increased in frequency and severity throughout the course of the following few days. The whispers became more audible, at times like her own voice and at other times a chorus of voices blended together. Shadows flickered around the edges of her vision, disappearing the instant she directed her gaze towards them. Knowing that sleep would come the whispers, the shadows, and the feeling of being watched, Claire started to dread the nights. She attempted to cover the mirror with a sheet, but it didn't seem to help. By morning, the sheet would be on the floor, and the moment the lights went down, the muttering would start. In a desperate attempt to discover a logical explanation for her experiences, Claire set out to explore the building. It was revealed to her that the previous renter, Anna, had passed away inexplicably. In the weeks before her death, Anna reportedly developed a growing paranoia and claimed that someone was observing her through the mirror. There were no indications of foul play when she was discovered dead in front of the mirror, her face contorted in panic. Claire made the horrible decision to move out of the apartment and stay with a friend until she could find somewhere else. However, when she was packing her luggage on her final night there, the muttering started up again. It sounded like a plea, or a warning this time, louder and more urgent. She turned to face the mirror and a shiver went down her spine. A person that wasn't her own was there in the reflection. The woman had a pale, emaciated face and large, terrified eyes. She was mouthing something that was desperate and hardly audible. Claire found herself motionless, unable to take her eyes off the woman whose reflection appeared to be getting closer. The woman in the mirror suddenly threw herself forward, her hands pressing on the glass as though she was attempting to burst through. Claire stared in horror as she screamed and staggered back, her heart thumping. The woman's hands were shoved against the glass, which started to break and spread outward. Claire was so terrified that she smashed a hefty bulb against the mirror with the nearest thing she could find. The glass broke, fragments tumbling to the ground in a sparkling waterfall. The sole sound in the room was the rain knocking on the window once more. That evening, Claire walked out and never came back. She relocated to a new, rural home and made an effort to move past the ordeal. She still occasionally hears the faint sound of whispering late at night, but she knows better than to peek in the mirror when she does. Antique technology, particularly antique phones, had always captivated Tom. He therefore couldn't help but buy an ancient rotary phone that he discovered at a flea market. It had a smooth black finish, a pleasing click when the dial turned, and it was in excellent shape. Its appeal was enhanced by the seller's eagerness to get rid of it, basically giving it away. After returning home, Tom arranged the phone in his study. He opted to connect it to the landline even though it was primarily decorative to see if it still functioned. He was surprised that practically immediately after plugging it in, the phone rang. He laughed when he responded, thinking it was an incorrect number. However, the voice on the other end sounded distorted and feeble, like it was coming from a far distance away. His name was being spoken by a woman whose voice it was. "Tom, please assist me." The nape of his neck became more hairy. "Who is this?" he questioned, a little trembling in his voice. However, there was silence, just a faint static that had an odd rhythm to it. Feeling uneasy, he hung up, writing it off as a practical joke or a crossed line. Still, the calls didn't stop. It was the same voice, the same request, each time he responded. "Tom, please assist me." With every call, the voice became more frantic, as though the woman was in grave danger. Despite Tom's best efforts, the number was consistently returned as unknown. Even after reaching out to the phone company, they maintained there were no problems with the connection. The calls increased in frequency over the next few days, interfering with his job, sleep, and even social interactions. The voice tormented him, its tone of desperation eating away at his thoughts. He started to dream about the woman, imagining her reaching out to him from the shadows with her terrified face contorted. Tom picked up the phone one evening after making yet another call to conduct some research. He learned that it had belonged to Evelyn, a woman who had lived in the house for decades before. Evelyn had been a solitary, depressed woman, according to the records. She had made one last phone call before taking her own life, but no one knew who she had contacted. Her death was terrible. The revelation shook Tom completely. The voice on the other end of the line was probably Evelyn's, he thought, imprisoned in the phone somehow, living out her last moments. But from him, what did she want? And how could he assist her? Tom chose to burn the phone in an attempt to put an end to the haunting. Taking it outside to the backyard, he picked up a hammer and destroyed it. However, while he was doing so, he heard a last helpless scream resound across the night air from the broken remnants. When that happened, the calls ceased, but Tom's anxiety persisted. He was plagued by a persistent sense that something had gone horribly wrong. He got a chilly feeling every time he walked by the study, as if something was still there, observing him, waiting for him to pick up the phone. After a while, Tom moved out of the house, but the phone's ghostly memories followed him. Evelyn's voice had begged for his assistance in a way he would never forget. Occasionally, when the home is silent and the wind is howling outside late at night, he believes he can still hear a faint sound like a rotary dial rotating and a whisper that gives him goosebumps.